join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Settle in, please, for a late morning meander through the latest politics, arts, culture and some ethical dilemmas too. Have the judgment and sentence handed down by the House of Commons Privileges Committee to Boris Johnson rekindled the flame of his political career? The former Prime Minister's allies, small in number but looming large in column inches, think, quote, the vindictiveness of the committee's conclusions could allow Johnson to snatch a victory from the jaws of defeat. If there's one thing we've learned from the man who, at least as a child, wanted to be world king, it's never to write him off. 2 military veterans will ask on this programme why the Etherton review into the treatment of LGBT people in the armed forces prior to the lifting of the ban in 2000 has yet to be published. It was handed to the government in May. LGBT veterans are seeking compensation and an apology for a legacy of trauma and fear, as many of them face disgrace and discharge for their sexuality. A new book explores the qualities of Northern Irish literature. Just over a century since the political entity's formation, authors still grapple with questions of identity and homeland, providing fertile ground for great writing. I'll be talking to some of Northern Ireland's current generation of writers. And finally, in this hour, Stefan Kyriazis has been exploring an enchanting London theatre, rescued from dereliction, within whose charming patina of decay you can see an innovative production of Gilbert and Sullivan. Later, we'll be debating whether the British government should receive back those who travelled to ISIS-held territory in Syria, with the former head of counter-terrorism at MI6 and the lawyer for the family of Shamima Begum. But before all of that, here are the latest news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good morning to you. It is 2 minutes past 11 here in the GB newsroom.
The Levelling Up Secretary has apologised for what he's described as unacceptable behaviour at a Conservative staff party during lockdown. Michael Gove says he's personally sorry after a video emerged showing staff members dancing and joking about COVID restrictions during the height of the pandemic. In the video obtained by The Mirror, one partygoer can be heard discussing bending the rules and laughing. At least 24 people attended the Christmas party in 2020. It was at Tory party headquarters when indoor socialising was banned. 2 of those were named in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. Mr Gove has told us disciplinary action has already been taken.
The reason why those steps were taken was to reduce the spread of the disease, in order to make sure that the pressures on the NHS were manageable, in order to make sure that we could treat people who were very ill. So, again, the actions here are deeply distressing, and I can only apologise to people that individuals behaved in this way. My understanding is that there was an investigation into the party when the photograph emerged, and people were disciplined.
Rishi Sunak is facing a 4th by-election following the resignation of a former Tory MP. David Warburton, who had the Tory whip suspended last April, has stepped down from his Somerton and Frome seat following accusations of sexual misconduct and cocaine use. He is the 4th Conservative MP in 8 days to resign, following announcements by Boris Johnson, Nigel Adams and Nadine Dorries. The UK has pledged an extra £16 million to boost Ukraine's cyber defences. It's in addition to £6.35 million promised last year. The government says it's to help Ukraine better defend its critical infrastructure from Russian attacks. The Prime Minister will use a summit this week to call on investors and businesses to step up their support for the country's economic recovery. And it comes as Ukraine continues its counter-offensive against Moscow's forces in the south and east of the country. Teachers in England will hold fresh strikes next month in their long-running dispute over pay. The National Education Unions announced walkouts on Wednesday the 5th and Friday the 7th of July. The NEU is also reballoting its members to see if they want to continue taking industrial action for the rest of the year. Now, if you've been getting used to the warm weather, the sunshine today might put a little dampener on it. There is some thunder, lightning and heavy rain forecast. The Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for thunderstorms across the majority of England and Wales. It will last until midnight. Heavy showers are expected to bring as much as 8 centimetres of rain within 3 hours in the worst affected regions. The warm temperatures, though, will continue, staying around the mid-20s. Prince William's vowed to tackle homelessness by building social housing on his own land. The Prince of Wales told The Times, ending the plight of hidden homelessness in the UK has been a lifelong ambition. He's expressed frustration at government, councils and charities who, he says, manage homelessness rather than prevent it. Many of the details of the 5-year plan will be announced next month. And Kensington Palace has released this new photo of Prince William and his children to mark Father's Day. Charlotte and George are either side of their dad, with the youngest, Louis, behind him, all smiling in what was taken on the Windsor estate earlier this year. This is GB News. More as it happens. We'll have another bulletin in an hour's time. Now it is back to Michael.
Thank you, Aaron. As we heard in the news, Rishi Sunak is facing a 4th by-election this summer now that Conservative MP David Warburton has decided to quit Parliament in the wake of misconduct allegations. The MP echoed Boris's cries of foul play and claimed that Parliament's oversight system is not fit for purpose. The Privileges Committee found that Boris Johnson misled Parliament repeatedly over the Partygate scandal, but the former Prime Minister might be relieved to learn that he wasn't partying alone, since new video footage shows Number 10 staffers thoroughly enjoying themselves in December 2020.
It's party. It's also done an ad and also Instagram Live. As long as we don't stream it, we're like. Well, I'm pretty sure the press is going to say. Laura? What do you think of this? Laura?
Some Boris supporters still believe that the Select Committee has been vindictive and that will enable Boris ultimately to snatch a victory from the jaws of defeat. To discuss this, I'm joined by Aubrey Allegretti, senior political correspondent at The Guardian, former advisor to Tony Blair, John McTernan, and Tory peer Daniel Moylan. Welcome to you all to GB News.
Michael.
Daniel, maybe to begin with you, what political future do you see for Boris?
Oh, I don't know, and I don't think Boris knows what political future he sees either, because he's not one of these people who, in my experience, sits and plans out what the next stage of life is going to bring. He's somebody who believes that opportunities arise from time to time and you need to be ready. As he once said in an interview, you know, if the ball comes loose from the scrum, then you sort of pick it up and run with it. And so I think that's very much his attitude to life. And I think there'll be lots of opportunities, actually. Lots of interesting things happening in British politics over the next couple of years. Because voters and parties are getting out of alignment with each other. Both the main parties are quite deeply out of alignment with what their voters think. And there could be some ructions, who knows, even in our fairly fixed first-past-the-post system, which makes it difficult for change to take place.
The attitude that you describe of Boris towards his future, I mean strikes me as eminently sensible.
Yeah.
But I also have a feeling, I didn't deal with Boris last week because I wanted to kind of ignore the subject, but I have the feeling over the last week that he's lost quite a lot of ground. If I was still a member of Parliament, I'd be so deeply furious about 4 by-elections, which, let's face it, might reduce the government's majority by 8 if they're all lost. That would be my attitude now if I were a member of Parliament. I think if I were a party worker also, if I were trudging around these by-elections, which are all, as it were, unnecessary, or at least 3 of them are unnecessary, I think I'd be pretty fed up too. Do you think he may have lost ground in the last week?
Well, it's 8 out of 80, isn't it? So it's hardly...
It was 80 back in 2019.
Well,
I've lost what the present score is.
Whatever it is, it's 8 out of 70 or 8 out of 60. It's still not life-threatening to the Prime Minister. And there's some advantage in getting them all out of the way at the same time, from his point of view, rather than stringing them out. So he might actually be grateful for the way things have played out, I don't know. But as far as the party workers are concerned, yeah, they are genuinely upset. Not, I think, about the by-elections. I think the problem with the Privileges Committee is one of the many problems with the Privileges Committee, of course, is that if you have a small body removing somebody who was elected by a larger body, then you get a sense of disenfranchisement on the people who put him there. So Boris was elected by 60, 70, 80%, I can't remember the percent of party members, then a large majority in the country, but a very small number of people actually removed him. Liz Truss was elected by a majority of party members over Rishi Sunak, who was on the ballot paper, and then she was removed by a small number of people, and we got Rishi Sunak anyway. And now we have the Privileges Committee trying to put the nail into Boris's coffin. So I think the narrower and smaller the number of people involved in doing the defenestration, the more anger you see amongst those who say, "But I voted for this guy. I voted for this guy, or this woman, or whatever."
John McTernan, the government that you advised, was not really in the habit of losing too many by-elections, from what I recall. They were doing rather well, generally ahead in the polls. But the prospect now, I mean, this government must kind of half assume that any by-election is a by-election that can be lost. And that opens up the prospect of a pretty gory summer for the Tories.
Yeah, and it is not all in one go, as Daniel was suggesting would be good. It's going to be strung out. There's going to be 2 together, then probably another one, and then one after the recess, whenever Nadine decides to resign. There's the Scottish by-election, which looks good for Labour, and the story's all going to be about the Liberal Democrats or the Labour Party and the Tory Party hurting. And I think you're right. Nobody has any appetite, nobody in the Tory Party, I think, will have any appetite for going out canvassing in Uxbridge or in Selby. I think it'll be difficult, and nobody really wants... The big thing, we've seen it since Rishi came in, Isaac Levido started advising the government on their strategy. They need to focus on their positive issues. What was the government's story for last week? I think it may have been meant to be AI and the AI Council coming back triumphantly from Washington. There's not been clear air for the government.
I was going to take you precisely to that point. Since you're in the habit of advising prime ministers, if you were advising Rishi now, I mean, first of all, would you say to him that the result of the last week has been positive or negative? I think Boris is, 6 foot under now, but on the other hand, we've got 4 by-elections. And secondly, how would you advise him about recovering the narrative?
the problem for Rishi is that he's decided what the narrative is, which is stop the votes, halve inflation. And the issue is, and get waiting lists down. Waiting lists aren't coming down. Inflation's not coming down. What's being done to cut inflation is interest rates going up, so mortgages are going up. And the problem is, Rishi always had an implicit, and you read the 5 pledges, stop the boats by passing legislation. Well, the legislation is passed, but the boats haven't been stopped. Inflation is a marker, an index symbol for cost of living. Ordinary people think cost of living is what vegetables cost, what bread costs, what their mortgage costs, their housing costs, their rents. You can't say inflation's coming down when people go, but my mortgage has gone up by 400, 500. I think it's the return of the real, isn't it? You can't repress material reality. And the difficulty is, the only decent strategy for Rishi, even now, is get things back on track, look competent, be competent, therefore take advantage of Boris going, say that's the soap opera was that guy, the soap opera was Liz Truss sacked, as Daniel said, by the bond markets, which is hilarious, and get back on to going, we've got it back on track, and put risk on Labour, put risk on Starmer, say you don't know what he'd do.
Let me bring in Aubrey. Aubrey, is it true that in the end, the by-elections even and the departure of Boris are sideshows? What really matters are the things that John has been talking about, the reality of people's lives, and they're not looking very good for the government.
That's true. If you're Rishi Sunak, you want to put as much kind of clear blue water between you and the sort of sleaze scandals that engulfed Boris Johnson. I think where they'll come unstuck is, A, you have these 4 by-elections. You have other unresolved issues from the Johnson era. You still have Chris Pincher under investigation by the Standards Commissioner. You still have Scott Benton under investigation by the Standards Commissioner. If those don't go their way, the Conservatives are going to face more headlines, potentially more problematic by-elections, and Rishi Sunak becomes so engulfed with the sort of sleaze that engulfed Boris Johnson's government, he isn't able to focus enough on the government's priorities. And I think there is also a concern developing amongst senior Conservatives that the 5 pledges, they think, hit the right points and hit the nails on the head. The delivery aspect of them is debatable, but they think they're the right pledges. But they don't yet see the sort of overarching post-election vision of Rishi Sunak, what they want him to achieve after that. What is the vision? At the moment, they think that he's almost too Starmer-esque, that he's sort of focused on delivering specific things, but there isn't enough of an overarching kind of raison d'etre for voting Conservative. And that's also going to be problematic for him in the run-up to the next election.
If small boat numbers were coming down, if inflation were coming down, do you think, Aubrey, that Rishi could sort of push aside scandals which are legacy scandals? You've mentioned people who were in the headlines during Boris's day. Do you think the ultimate, what really matters is what's happening to people's pockets and what's happening to the small boats?
To a large extent, yes. But also politics is driven by narrative. And so if the Conservatives sort of get themselves into a losing spiral, that will lead to more nervousness and jitters amongst the Conservative Party, which only leads to more infighting, more rebellions on votes, more people speaking out because they think the Conservatives are heading towards election catastrophe and they want to do as much as they can to stop it and or position themselves for the post-election leadership race when they can say, look, I told you about this, I warned you. So those are the 2 difficulties.
John, if Aubrey is right that Rishi doesn't have a vision, is that the ideal ground for Keir Starmer? Because most people think he has no vision.
Well, Keir has set a vision, but it's quite a high level. It's the missions, it's the growing the economy faster, highest productivity. What actually Keir lacks at the moment is the retail offer, the pledge or the symbolic policy that crystallises intention, that people in the pub or at the school gates or in a cab can go, do you know what? I'm going to vote Labour because they're offering me something. Nobody likes to vote for one party because the other guys are terrible. You want to tell yourself you're making a positive choice, not a negative choice. Look, I'll take negative votes over no votes. But Labour do need to seal the deal as the jargon. And I think getting that retail offer... And a difficulty, a challenge for Labour is, if Labour had announced their childcare policy before the budget, they'd have been denounced by the government. Where are you going to get the money from? Jeremy Hunt announced Labour's childcare policy in the budget. And so if Labour has a good idea, the danger is canny ministers will steal it.
Daniel, you were hinting at the fragility of the present party system. Were you thinking that someone like Boris might find himself with Nigel Farage in some sort of new alignment?
I think Boris and Nigel Farage in the same cruise liner would lead to explosions, let alone in the same taxi or office. And it would be very hard to see how the two of them would get on, because they both have, it appears to me, a firm conviction of their own self. So I'm not making any speculations in that direction. But I think what I'm saying also applies on the left. I mean, when I look at Guardian columnists, we're graced with the presence of a very distinguished one here. When I read Guardian columnists writing about Starmer, they're absolutely scathing. And I can see an awful lot of people on what calls itself the progressive left who are deeply unhappy with the Labour Party as it currently stands. And who knows? I mean, there is a party out on the left, a respectable party that has an MP, the Green Party. Who knows how many people might drift away from a Labour Party that they see crushing the left, pushing the left out into another party, and who knows what might happen on the right. I think there's a lot of flux in a way that we don't normally see.
I'm going to allow Daniel to have the last word. I think, as a Tory, he's allowed to have a little moment of hope in what looks like a rather hopeless situation at the moment. So many thanks to Aubrey, Allegretti, John McTurnan and Lord Moylan. You are watching Michael Portillo on GB News, Britain's news channel. After the break, I'll be talking to a former RAF navigator who once flew me from Basra to Kuwait. But we won't be fuzzily reminiscing. We'll be discussing a much-awaited report into the legacy of trauma and mistreatment of LGBT people in the military.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. As Pride Month got underway at the beginning of June, it's been reported that a scheme to pardon men and women criminalised for homosexual activity in the past will be expanded. It would mean that more people, and particularly veterans of our armed forces, can have convictions expunged. But it's a little more complicated than that, because separately, LGBT veterans are still awaiting the publication of a review by Lord Etherton into their treatment during the years 1967 to 2000, when homosexuality in the military was punished severely. Many LGBT servicemen and women live secret lives, fearful of being discharged, blackmailed, criminalised and driven out of their careers. The report is currently with the government, but so far there's no date been given for publication. To tell me more, it's my pleasure to be joined by Patrick Lister-Todd, a former Lieutenant Commander in the Royal Navy, and former RAF navigator Caroline Page. Patrick, let's hear your story first. Were you punished for being gay in the military?
No, not directly. I was one of the lucky ones, in a sense, insofar as I decided to voluntarily resign early. There were reasons for that. I'd been serving for 20 years at that time as a Royal Navy Executive Branch officer, and I had a partner who I'd first met, my very first partner, in '88, having joined in '72. And he was HIV positive. At the time, I had a very responsible job at the Faslane nuclear submarine base, and I later went on back down to Portsmouth, my home city, to head up the tertiary stage of junior officers training, and where we ran the officer watch course. And this was a very difficult life. I fell in love with this individual. I found out that he was HIV positive. We knew at that time that that meant that one day he would die. And somewhere over the horizon lurked this iceberg. And we were intent on having as good a life as possible together. But I had to do it in a Jekyll and Hyde existence. When I found out in '91 that my next appointment in the Royal Navy was going to be second command of a Type 42 destroyer, I then had to make a decision. And it was a very easy decision. Was it my career? Was it my partner? And I decided on my partner. And so he died 2 days before my last day, after I'd given a year's notice. In many ways, my story is not important, because all those people, thousands, who lost their careers because they'd been found out at the time that there was a ban on LGBT plus people being serving, they're the ones who our work at the moment, and this report is in particular focused upon, because the way they were treated in some instances was embarrassing by any standard. And Lord Etherton's report... And
embarrassing to our civilised society?
To anyone, yes. I mean, I've spoken last week with the Chief of the Defence Staff, and who was at what was meant to be the launch of the report at the Imperial War Museum on the main floor, incredible setting. And, of course, it wasn't a launch. It was actually a party for Lord Etherton's team to acknowledge the end of their work. But they'd hoped that it would be launched that day, and it wasn't. So that a lot of veterans there, a lot who had joined voluntarily to serve their country, who'd expected more, and they are feeling very let down at the moment.
Caroline, let's hear a part of your story. You joined the Royal Air Force as a man. What was the legal position in the armed forces about changing your sex in those days?
Yeah, I'm a transgender woman. When I joined, I was aware of that.
So in those days, the society, let alone the military, didn't understand the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. So I would have been considered as a gay man, and I would have been subject to the same dismissal consequences as gay service people. So it was known as a gay ban because that was the terminology that was in use at the time. Nowadays, it would have been known as an LGBT plus ban. It really didn't discriminate against identity or orientation.
But in an extraordinary way, observing from a distance, you somehow took on the system and beat the system.
I was very fortunate. I was so lucky. I had to hide who I was for 19 years, and many of our veterans, those that weren't dismissed or given criminal convictions for being gay, still had to do that. They had to put their lives on hold and serve their country, and at the same time run the risk of being outed. And so for 19 years I did that. I was lucky when I challenged for me to serve openly and be myself, because you can't just carry on doing that. You have to live your own life as well as do the job that you're doing. And so I was fortunate, yes, I was allowed to stay in service. So in 1999 I transitioned, and I served 16 years after that as a tactics and platform protection specialist navigator.
So you're allowed to serve as a woman, as a trans woman, and how were you treated then by the people you were working with?
The armed forces took some time. So the ban was lifted in January 2000, so not that long ago. And the armed forces took some time to get over the culture that was invasive of the forces at the time, to realise that actually diversity and inclusion is a power. It's using your people, letting them be themselves makes them stronger, makes the team stronger. And so it took a while to do that. So it took 4 or 5 years. And champions stood up and challenged that. But once the armed forces realised that, it's transformed into what it is today, which is openly inclusive and supportive, and it values all its people. But what hasn't happened is we haven't stepped back to those veterans who were dismissed in shameful circumstances and in the most horrendous ways. They were young people serving in our armed forces, and we let them down massively. And when they were dismissed from service, nobody has tried to find out what happened to them, and to address the consequences of the way they were dismissed, whether they went to prison, whether they were given interrogations through a special investigations branch, invasive medical inspections, a whole manner of ways in which they were dismissed. And they've had to live with that all of this time. So it's important for us to address that, and that's why we set up the charity.
The change in the armed forces has been extraordinary, because I was Defence Secretary between 95 and 97. And of course, all the advice I received from the armed forces was that it was impossible to think of changing this, that for matters of discipline, it was absolutely necessary, that there should be no doubt. You couldn't have the idea that 2 servicemen were in love with each other or something like that. This would make them unreliable, discipline would be impossible, etc., etc., etc. Patrick, may I ask you, you came from a military background, from a military family. You knew what the law was, however unjust we now all consider it to have been. Why did you join an organisation where what you were was illegal?
Well, of course, at the age of 17, which is when I first went to Dartmouth, your sexuality is not entirely top of your list. I wanted an adventure. I wanted a profession. And as it turned out, I wanted a calling. And the calling was the sea. And I was wholly committed to being a member of our military, with all that came with it, that some didn't come back. My uncle didn't come back from Burma. And I had a father who was a colonel had been a colonel in the Durham Light Infantry. So the fact that it was not just illegal, but a criminal offence was hardly something that, really mattered to me at all. I wanted to get out there to those sort of, those palm tree sort of ringed islands and have some fun. It was a serious side to it. It was only my early years when I suddenly realised, as a sort of growing young man, that I couldn't have my cake and eat it. So I evolved rules which were, if I can put it this way, no gay friends, no partners, certainly no sex with other service personnel. And somewhere over there, after I'd been very careful, then perhaps I could have a life. So I went through my teens and my 20s, my early 30s, without any of the things, without anyone close in my life. So when I did meet someone, he was very important to me. And if I could just sort of preempt another question, yes, I was, as it was then, positively vetted under your, you were my boss as Secretary of State for Defence. And that was very difficult because during the period that you were in that position, I did have my PV come up for its 10-yearly review. And the whole thing was that you have to lie. You're asked a question, and the joke was, I'm not going to repeat the story here, but I was being interviewed by a retired Royal Marine Major, and I told him something, and he'd laughed and said, well done, and then moved on. And I'd actually told him a truth, but he'd misinterpreted what I'd said. It was a nonsense that I knew that I was, I was loyal and patriotic.
Both of you deserve much more time than we've been able to give you today, and I apologise for that. I would have liked to have continued the discussion much further. But thank you both for coming on, and good luck in the near term with getting the Etherton report published. So thank you very much to Patrick, Lister-Todd and Caroline Page. Northern Ireland is roughly the same state as the US state of Connecticut. The province has proved fertile soil for the production of great writers, some of whom were inspired by the complications of the place itself. Now a new book called The Stranger's House by Alex Poots explores Northern Ireland's literary legacy through some of its most celebrated authors and poets, including Louis MacNeice, Seamus Heaney and C.S. Lewis. Alex Poots joins me now, alongside journalist Malachy O'Doherty, who's author of Terry Brankin Has a Gun, about the legacy of the Troubles. Great to see you both. Alex Poots, in what way does the division of Northern Ireland produce great literature? Why are those who write influenced by it, and how?
Well, one of the primary themes I discuss in my book is homesickness. And I think also a particular focus on the home is a broad literary theme that we're all familiar with and that occurs across cultures. I think what makes Northern Irish literature in many cases quite different is the fact that this is a homesickness that occurs in situ. And I suspect that the reason for that, I would posit, is that you are particularly in earlier decades faced with potentially another community whose idea of home is mutually exclusive to yours, and so naturally creates an enormous amount of psychological tension, which has produced decades of horror, but some also has inspired some pretty extraordinary poems and novels. So that's my starting point.
Not all authors that you mention are much affected by the politics of Northern Ireland in their writing, or indeed in their private correspondence. I think of someone like C.S. Lewis, who kind of left Northern Ireland politics aside, according to your book.
Yeah, Lewis is interesting because he belongs to a now vanished class, really, a class of essentially bourgeois Protestants who had a pretty permeable relationship with what I suppose we might call the English gentry. These Protestants tended to be educated in English public schools. They would then go to Oxford and Cambridge, and many of them would never, in fact, return to Ulster. Now, Lewis was probably more inspired by the Irish landscape than he was by Irish politics. I do talk a little bit in the book about Lewis's fixation, brief flirtation, I suppose, whilst at Oxford with an Irish nationalism, which was perhaps a little naive, quite different to the more sophisticated politicised nationalisms that we see on the island of Ireland today, mainly inspired by some rather twee poems from the late 19th century. But yeah, broadly speaking, I think Lewis, certainly as an adult, was more interested in worlds of his own creation. And of course, he was a great theological writer. So I think he was probably looking to his heavenly reward towards the end of his career rather than focusing on the situation around him.
Malachy O'Doherty, you've just written a book about the legacy of the Troubles, and I might sum it up by saying that it's that murder and retribution go on and on without end. And it's raised the question, really, why 25 years after the Good Friday Agreement are you and others still writing about the Troubles?
Well, a good question. I mean, one of the reasons for writing about the Troubles is because publishers are asking for it or accepting it. If you look at a period just immediately after the ceasefires and the Good Friday Agreement, publishers wouldn't touch the subject at all, and writers were being told to go away and write about something else. That changed for me about 2013 when I got a call from Faber asking me to do a biography of Gerry Adams. I'd done a novel, Terry Branken Has a Gun, which wasn't getting published and was being rejected by English publishers, and was later published in Ireland to great acclaim, I might say. But I mean, one of the interesting things I see showing up through a lot of the modern Northern Irish literature is a sense of guilt and responsibility. And I suppose that dovetails with the idea of Alex's idea of homesickness. If you look at the theories of terrorism in Northern Ireland, one of the motifs brought back over and over again in discussion is the fish in the water, the idea that the IRA and other paramilitaries could not have operated unless they were working within a genial environment, cultural environment, social environment. And that would be contested by what we might call the few bad apples, or it's either a sick society or it's bad people. And what you're getting through the literature, I think, is some kind of agonizing about the state of society. I mean, I'm thinking of Dara McKeown's recent novel about the Enniskillen bomb, which is about a young man who frets about something he saw and didn't report. I'm thinking of Louise Kennedy's novel Trespasses, about a young teacher having an affair with a lawyer, but challenged in a sense to take some responsibility for violent outcomes. So what I think, and I mean, even Jan Carson's novel The Raptures is about someone doing something fundamentally naive and silly, which has enormous consequences. And I think we're maybe seeing something emerging through the fiction about Northern Ireland of a questioning of the responsibility of ordinary people, and it may not be warranted guilt. I mean, there were bad people doing bad things, and yet we're having writers who never did bad things, creating characters who question this in their own behavior, who wonder what they may of themselves have inadvertently contributed to the chaos.
That is fascinating. Alex Poots, can I put to you, we've not mentioned Milkman, which I think is by Anna Burns, and I thought just one of the greatest books I've ever read, but absolutely revelatory about the lack of choice that people living, say, in a Republican area controlled by terrorists had. And that was a prize-winning book, and deserves its place, does it not, in the distinguished list of literature that's come out of Northern Ireland?
Yeah, absolutely. Milkman's very interesting. We should probably start by saying that Anna Burns is quite clever not to locate the action explicitly in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, so that she does create a little bit of distance there. But I mean, what I found interesting about the reviews for Milkman was that, first of all, they didn't focus on the fact that it is, in many ways, a black comedy. It's a very funny book that talks about some very, very nasty things. And I do think that's a thread that's often lost when people talk about Northern Ireland, because one of the first things you notice when you move here is an incredibly dark and mordant sense of humour, which I think is one of the quintessential identifying characteristics of the Northerner here. But Burns also focuses on the sense of being trapped, of being confined and cabined. And, to use the great Blakean quote, this idea of the mind-forged manacles. And everyone in this society that she describes is imprisoned. They're imprisoned both by an oppressive state that doesn't like them very much, but they're also imprisoned by members of their own community who believe that they should act in a very strict set of ways, and any kind of deviation from acceptable behaviour is punished brutally. And so even the simple act of the central character walking down the road reading a book is regarded as dangerous eccentricity that needs to be addressed, even from her own family members, perhaps especially from her own family members.
I'm going to have to call an end to it there. May I say to you both, I read both your books. I enjoyed them enormously. Alex,
thank you very much.
Poots, your book is called The Stranger's House. Malachy Odokti, yours is it Terry Brankin Has a Gun?
And 11 others, but the others are all not.
And 11 others.
So, but you learned something from them. Bye, Michael.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Malachy. Stay with us. After the break, Stefan Kyriazis interviews the director of an all-male production of Gilbert and Sullivan's The Mikado in one of the most enchanting spaces in London.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Gilbert and Sullivan set the Mikado in Japan slightly to disguise its comical critiques of British politicians. A new production has taken the opera to the exotic location of Wilton's Music Hall, a beautiful venue of faded grandeur in East London. It has an all-male cast and a female director, Sasha Regan, and Stefan Kyriazis has been speaking to her.
It's a beautiful day in London. We're here in London's East End at Wilton's Music Hall, which is one of the oldest Georgian music halls still in existence in the world. They're currently showing an all-male version of Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado, and I'm about to interview the director, Sasha Regan. Let's go inside and take a look. Hi Sasha, thank you so much for talking to us. And we're here in the incredible inside of Wilton's Music Hall with your amazing set up behind us. Anyone that knows me knows that I went absolutely bonkers over HMS Pinafore last year. This year, you're back again with the all-male Mikado. So, first of all, Gilbert and Sullivan, why? Isn't this tired, old-fashioned?
That's what most people think. And that's what you get a lot of feedback from audience members saying, I thought I was going to hate it, I've been dragged along, I had a bad experience with when my granddad took me when I was young. But these, I would say these are more like musicals the way that we do them. Mm-hmm. So they're fully choreographed. Most of the boys are musical theatre trained, not opera singers. Because, back in 1880 when Gilbert and Sullivan started writing, these were essentially the first ever incarnation of a musical, weren't they? Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's too disrespectful not to have opera singers doing it. Because we bring them to life and hopefully we bring a new audience to see them, and we don't have to just leave them on a bookshelf forever.
And it's wonderful to keep them going, but also the fact that, more than anything, I think people are always quite surprised about how funny it is. And that's really, really, I know from you and your productions and the way you do it, the humour is absolutely at the heart of it.
Yeah, I love working on comedy. And I've got, you've seen a few now that you have a few company members that come back each time, yes, and they know the style and they know. It's a mixture of the physical, but also the script. We don't change the script. The script is funny. They're really well written, and they are brilliant satires, and nothing changes, does it? Politically. No, so we can still laugh at the same gags because politicians are still making the same mistakes now they were in 1880.
Indeed, and actually, because this show, that there's a potential minefield that obviously it's set in this fictional land of Titipu, which is very kind of Japanesery, and there's a huge cultural backlash going on at the moment about cultural appropriation, whether it's appropriate anymore, to do the costume. So you very neatly, completely sidestepped this.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't want to offend anyone, and I think we've all learned now.
So what did you do to kind of get around it?
So we've decided to set it in an English countryside in the 1950s on a boys' camping trip. Because we do all male, we always have to find that extra reason for doing it with an all male cast. So, and the designer, Ryan, who did Pinafore and is now working in Regent's Park on Carjo Vol, we work together really easily. And so we think of times and styles that we like, and, where is a place that you would find a group of good looking young men? We're running out, so we've.
The audience still wants to know.
Here at Wilton's.
Exactly. All right, you heard it here. Come here for that. And so you get things like sort of strings of underwear across, but also they're just wearing pots and pans on their heads.
Yeah. So the idea is everything comes from the rucksack that they carry in. So there's all of the waistcoats and. Kitty Shaw's outfit that she wears is made out of a National Trust picnic blanket that you can buy online, so that nothing should appear there that wouldn't have been on that campsite in the 50s. So then when you discuss that with the designer at the start of the rehearsal process, it then makes it really easy when you start working with the choreographer to go, oh, hang on a minute, we can't have canes, we better have sticks, and we can't have top hats. What would they have? Oh, look, what, the pots and pans from around the fire. So it then makes it easy to be imaginative.
And we did talk a little bit about the fact that, this was written and sort of first came out in 1885. I mean, I've also done stuff recently where we've covered a Greek tragedy, which is 3,000, 4,000 years old. And you're thinking, this is still relevant. Like, human nature never changes. So the show is all about, it's making fun of empire and bureaucracy.
Yeah, and people having multiple jobs with this, basically wearing the same hat for multiple jobs, which we've definitely seen with all of the backhanders and things that have been going on in our Boris's
Corruption,
government,
yeah.
haven't we? Yeah,
Yeah.
the corruption. So you hand me a little bribe and I'm in this department and then I'm going to be in this department and I'm going to be in that department. So anyone coming to see it can recognise that.
It does feel very, very painfully relevant sometimes when you're watching it. But not, like things I've watched, there's a massive move at the moment with theatre. There's this need to have a message, to go, I have something important to tell you. And my belief is that it's far better to just entertain and people will then absorb. So I don't think with any of your works you ever go in going, I'm going to tell you something you need to know.
No, I always, as a director, I think I'm an audience member, so I only direct what I think I would enjoy to see. So I do it from that point of view. I think people still come and enjoy the satire of it, but I also think it's very important for the LGBT community.
Okay.
Because I feel that I've been doing them for like 12 years now, that at some point, looking around with, you know, my friends that we go to the theatre with, a lot of the work that was targeted at them might be of the lowest common denominator. You know, it's naked and...
Okay.
And actually, what is beautiful, if you come and watch these, whether you're gay or straight, is that it just happens to be two men that fall in love in the show.
The audiences are very, very mixed.
Really mixed.
And
it's
all
amazing.
ages.
Yeah. So we get Gilbert and Sullivan fans, you get the grannies and grandpas, and we've had children in all ages, which I think is phenomenal, because I think when we first started, we had to really rely on, you know, people that were Gilbert and Sullivan fans, and now they're bringing their grandchildren in, going, come on, come and see this. Or, you know, there's Gilbert and Sullivan Society is closing down all the time now because it's not recruiting new members. So as we go around the country, we tend to see more young people as well from university towns, because we're going to Cambridge and Bath and places like that. Yeah, so then you get younger people from those unis coming in and seeing it and going, oh, we could do that.
And also I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the crazy, incredible history, because I didn't know this until actually I came to see your Pinafore last year, and I was researching and looking through the programme as well. And this incredible history of all-male productions, actually, which makes sense, in the World War, like World War II. So I was looking, it was like Stalag 383, I think it was. Like, this is an officer's prisoner of war camp in Germany or Bavaria, where they put on Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yeah. One of our producers had gone to an auction and stumbled across these albums. Wow. And they are beautifully curated, handwritten programmes, black and white photographs, and someone had kept the entire history of the productions that they put on in the officers' camp, I think it was, all the cast names, and I think they'd managed to track down a couple of the people that were in the programme, but the costumes that they'd made from whatever they could find in the camp and everything, and I suppose it's a different side to what is normally documented about the war, isn't it? That you think that people may have, if they were in there for a long time, I imagine they had to find joy somewhere.
And also the sense of collaboration, because they had to go to the Germans and barter or ask for help with props and costumes or whatever, which was given, and then very often the Germans would come and be part of the audience as well. So it's rather like we were talking about earlier, the Christmas Day football match. This incredible sense of theatre, again, giving joy to people that were in an awful situation, but also bringing connections and kind of comradeship across the line, even at the height of war. Something crazy and kind of silly, almost like Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it when I saw the albums. I could, because the costumes are so ornate. Yeah. And they've got wigs, I think, as well. And you think, how on earth did they find those? Yeah, I wish I could have. They obviously had a bigger budget.
And then your background as well. I know, you know, it's very much in our head is Gilbert and Sullivan just for posh people? Number one.
I'm not posh.
Right.
And it's not. And it's totally for me. By making these more like musicals, my hope would be that people feel that it's accessible, because they are so ridiculous and daft and fun, and you can't. If new musicals were written in the same way that the songs in this show were written, there would be smash hits going on all the time, because the way they construct the songs, they're brilliant. And I don't actually know a lot of people that go to the opera, sadly.
Okay.
I don't go to the opera. This is an operetta, so if someone comes, a little kid comes and watches this and thinks, oh, I'm going to investigate what else is out there, then I think it's a really good gateway for people into theatre.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Sasha. I know you've got everybody waiting because everyone's backstage getting ready to go on tonight. So, and apparently curry afterwards with the...
Yeah,
the team.
company curry tonight.
Sadly, I'm not invited to.
You can come.
No, I already know enough of the boys. It's all right. But it's just a joy being here, and it's lovely seeing it like this. But I can't wait. I urge people, come and see small theatre, small venues like this. It's truly, truly magical. So please, please, please support all our small theatres.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. We have more arts, culture and world affairs for you. We start with a meaty ethical discussion. The British government faces pressure to receive back Britons who travelled to ISIS-held territory in Syria who are currently languishing in desert detention camps. I'll be joined by the former head of counter-terrorism at MI6, as well as the lawyer for the family of Shamima Begum. At their height, the Habsburgs ruled over half of Europe. and were renowned for their intense Catholic faith. The family has fallen from political power, but at least one remains deeply Roman Catholic. We'll be joined from Rome by Eduard Habsburg, who was surprised to be asked by Viktor Orban to be Hungary's ambassador to the Vatican. He's become a social media influencer with his socially conservative writings. Today's programme is highly international. We will connect with conservationists in Zimbabwe, who are hugely concerned by a private members' bill making its way through the British Parliament. They say that banning imports of hunting trophies would decimate an industry that preserves wildlife populations, which might otherwise face illegal poaching. And they've accused those backing the bill of adopting colonial attitudes to Africa. And finally, for our Taste of Britain, I'll be enjoying early dessert as Eric Lanlin, aka Cake Boy, a master pâtissier, will bring some of his exquisite creations into the studio. All of that to come after your latest news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Good afternoon to you. It is 3 minutes past 12. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. The Levelling Up Secretary has apologised for what he's described as unacceptable behaviour at a Conservative staff party during lockdown. Michael Gove says he's personally sorry after a video emerged showing staff members dancing and joking about COVID restrictions during the height of the pandemic. In the video obtained by The Mirror, one party-goer can be heard discussing bending the rules and laughing. At least 24 people attended the Christmas party in 2020. It was at Tory party headquarters when indoor socialising was banned. Two of those named were in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. Mr Gove told us disciplinary action has already been taken.
The reason why those steps were taken was to reduce the spread of the disease, in order to make sure that the pressures on the NHS were manageable, in order to make sure that we could treat people who were very ill. So again, the actions here are deeply distressing, and I can only apologise to people that individuals behaved in this way. My understanding is that there was an investigation into the party when the photograph emerged, and people were disciplined.
Now, MPs will debate any possible punishment for Boris Johnson tomorrow after he was found to have misled Parliament over Partygate. The Privileges Committee recommended the former Prime Minister should face a 90-day suspension had he not already resigned in advance of the judgment. It's understood his supporters are being encouraged to abstain from the vote, but the former Brexit Secretary David Davis told Camilla Tominey he will support the committee, saying its findings are clear.
One of the things about Parliament is it's the highest court in the land.
Yeah.
That creates a problem when you're coming to privileges. What's that problem? It's like having a trial in a village. Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
Nobody is entirely unbiased.
How do they know his own mind at the time?
They don't have to. What they know is what he knows.
Yeah.
If you go to a party, you know it was a party. You don't need an advisor to tell you.
Rishi Sunak is facing a fourth by-election following the resignation of a former Conservative MP. David Warburton, who had the Tory whip suspended last April, has stepped down from his Somerton and Frome seat following accusations of sexual misconduct and cocaine use. He's the fourth Tory MP in 8 days to resign following announcements by Boris Johnson, Nigel Adams and Nadine Dorries. The number of migrants entering the UK in small boats via the English Channel this year has surpassed 10,000. According to Home Office figures, 374 people were detected making the journey yesterday. Crossings have increased in recent days as the weather has improved, but the number right now is still below the equivalent at this point last year. Almost 46,000 migrants crossed the Channel in 2022. The UK has pledged an extra £16 million to boost Ukraine's cyber defences. It's in addition to £6.35 million promised last year. The government says it's to help Ukraine better defend its critical infrastructure from Russian attacks. The Prime Minister will use a summit this week to call on investors and businesses to step up their support for the country's economic recovery. It comes as Ukraine continues its counter-offensive against Moscow in the south and east of the country. Thunder, lightning and heavy rain are moving across the UK, leading to concerns of flash flooding. The Met Office is predicting wind and hail with yellow warnings for thunderstorms across the majority of England, Wales and Northern Ireland until midnight. It could lead to a month's worth of rain falling in just a few hours. It comes as a result of this recent warm weather, which is set to continue today, with temperatures in the mid to high 20s. Prince William has vowed to tackle homelessness by building social housing on his own land. The Prince of Wales told The Times ending the plight of hidden homelessness in the UK has been a lifelong ambition. He's expressed frustration at government, councils and charities who, he says, manage homelessness rather than prevent it. Many of the details of the 5-year plan will be announced next month. This is GB News. More as soon as it happens. But now, back to Michael.
Thank you, Aaron Armstrong. 4 years ago, Shamima Begum's British citizenship was revoked by the then Home Secretary Sajid Javid. She remains in a detention camp in northern Syria, along with more than 100 other British people, plus their children. She travelled to ISIS-held territory before the terror group was overthrown and destroyed. Does the British government have a duty now to bring those people to this country, possibly to face justice? To discuss this, I'm joined by lawyer Tasneema Akunji, who represents Shamima Begum's family, and former head of counter-terrorism at MI6, Richard Barrett, CMG. I'm going to start off by making it clear to viewers that both of our guests believe that the British government does have a duty to receive these people back, though perhaps for slightly different reasons, so it's up to them to convince our audience of their case. Tasneema, to begin with, what is the basis of the case for saying that Shamima Begum should return?
Well, effectively that she was a British citizen. She was born here, raised here, radicalised here, frankly, and she left the country using a British passport. She has very little, if any, nexus to Bangladesh, which is what the British government say her alternative citizenship would be. She's never been to the country and only has a connection through her parents, they being Bangladeshi citizens in their origin. So the idea that we have a person who was entirely our problem and then try and dump that person as a problem on the people of Syria or the SDF, well, the basis of that is that that's simply incorrect and wrong to do.
The verb applied to us, the British, that we dumped her, seems a little inappropriate. She's in Syria because she took herself there.
So she managed to take herself there despite the fact that there was an active police investigation at the time where she was subject of. So there was a girl from her school who'd gone to Syria in 2014. The police were questioning her friends and networks around her, but the police had failed to tell her parents of the threat to her in terms of radicalisation and leaving. And additionally to that, we learnt later that one of our allies, the Canadians, they were instrumental in trafficking her over the border from Turkey into Syria. And this is all happening whilst she's a child.
I was going to say, is it part of your case that she was a child? Well, is it?
It is, yeah.
Yes. So I assume out of the 130 who are in Syrian detention camps, quite a lot of them are not children, were not children then. Mm-hmm. So would your argument, you represent Shamima Begum, so would your argument not apply to many of the others?
Well, our argument is fortified by the fact that she's a child, but the very fundamentals of this are that where we have our citizens abroad, then we have a responsibility to deal with them, their good or bad behaviour. Now, in terms of how we've looked at other people, at the same time as Shamima Begum, we have Hashim Abedi, who was the brother of the bomber of the Ariana Grande concert. Now, he was a British citizen, but also Libyan, and at the very same time that the British government is blocking Shamima Begum from coming back, the British government was frankly bribing Libyan officials in order to find Mr. Abedi and bring him back to the UK in order to face justice. So we've got this entirely contradictory approach where we have somebody who's guilty of numerous murders, very dangerous person, whereas British officials are making sure that despite the laws that stop him from coming back, he is brought back, is tried in British courts, and is found guilty. But at exactly the same time, a British citizen who is in Syria is then blocked from coming back, despite on any metric not being anywhere near as dangerous as Mr. Obeidi.
Richard, you used to work for MI6, which is meant to protect us from terror. How is it that you think that Shamima Begum should come back? And by the way, let's generalise it as well, because I think you would believe that of the others too, would you not, that they should be brought back?
Yes, I do believe that, but perhaps for different reasons. I mean, there's a legal question that you've been discussing just now, but I think there's also the British reputational question as well. I worked, after leaving my job with the government here, at the United Nations for 12 years and dealing with terrorism. And I think it was notable how many countries would look to the UK to give some sort of lead, not just because of their experience, perhaps, in the past and so on, and the sort of tradition of liberalism, if you like, and observing the rule of law and all those important things, but also as a country that was trying to build an inclusive society. And I think on both those counts of our valid advice, the wisdom, if you like, of our attitudes and so on, and our policy proposals, I think also it's very important to remember that the Shamima Begum case does have an internal effect as well. And I think that many people would say, well, you know, would she have had this sort of treatment had she been called something more obviously British, you know, and had her skin been whiter, you know, and she'd come from Guildford or something rather than Bethnal Green. And you know, I'm sure not. I mean, you know, the law is applied, I'm sure, insofar as the courts can, equally across the spread of our population. But nonetheless, that perception does exist. And if we reckon that one of the causes of terrorism is that people feel excluded, in some way second class and discriminated against, then surely we should be doing everything we can to demonstrate that that is not the case.
How strongly do you feel that? I must say, I think personally, share in your guilt. I don't feel that I'm responsible for terrorism. I don't feel that I've been part of building an exclusive society in which people feel so marginalised that their only option is to start killing people in large numbers. But is that your basis? You feel a sense of guilt? Do you feel that we're all responsible for this?
I feel society is responsible for what its members do, yes, to a certain extent. But, of course, you know, we're fortunate in talking about very, very few people here, a tiny, tiny number of people.
And actually, that rather strengthens the point, doesn't it? Why is society responsible for what a very tiny number of people does?
Well, who would be responsible for Shamima Begum's attitudes when she left? Admittedly, she was 15. So
well, those who radicalised her, I suppose. Very, very militant, very unpleasant, very criminal killers.
Well, so you say. I don't know who radicalised her. From what I've learnt about the case, yes, there were some. There was her friend from her locality who radicalised, who said it was a great thing to come to join the Islamic State and so on. And maybe for somebody of 15 who felt rather sort of trapped in their rut in East London, it did sound quite an attractive thing to go over there. You know, it's all the videos were of sunny days with children playing and all that sort of stuff.
But now I feel even less responsible, because if you say, you know, this was a child who was attracted by visions of sunlit uplands, I feel even less that my society is responsible for this delusion.
Well, I think that we do have a responsibility, and I think the politicians should express that responsibility. And I'm sure you felt that when you were a senior politician yourself, that somehow you are there to not only represent society, but to help society develop. And we all think, or we certainly thought in those days, that development would lead to more inclusivity, more liberalism, you know, and a better attitude towards our neighbours. But that, if I can, I know you want to move on to other things, but if I can just come to the international point, I mean, I know we've sort of deliberately excluded ourselves from various international fora, and that's, of course, a shame, but nonetheless, in those that we still belong, and when we did belong to wider groups, I think that people did look to us as people who could set an example. And if you think of terrorism in most other countries at the moment, I think a lot of it is born from internal division. You can say who's responsible, of course, but nonetheless, there is internal division in many, many countries, and that has led to awful atrocities against the public in general.
Tasneema, we are coming to an end, but in a few seconds, if you could, convince our viewers that Shamima Begum should return and tell us what should happen to her when she gets back.
Well, we are all responsible for our neighbours, and that's one of the fundamental ideas of what society is. Shamima Begum was our neighbour, and she's gone off into a country because of failures within our own. We should bring her back, and we should demonstrate to the international community that we take care of our own, and we take care of our own problems, which means that we can bring her to trial if there's evidence against her, and we can have a jury of her peers and our peers judge what appropriate punishment should happen to her, not just leave her cast in the desert as an idea of what a state can do to its citizens.
Well, I'm grateful to you both, to Tasneema Akunji and Richard Barrett, and it'll be interesting to know whether our audience was convinced. In a few minutes, we'll be joined by the modern-day scion of the once almighty Habsburg family, who as Hungarian ambassador to the Vatican has rekindled the intimate relationship between his ancestral homeland and the Catholic Church. Stay with us.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back. Over the course of 1,000 years, the ebb and flow of the Habsburg family's power defined the course of European history. And while the Austro-Hungarian Empire's days are over, the family's Roman Catholic faith is still represented by Eduard Habsburg, the Hungarian ambassador to the Vatican. Appointed in 2015 when Hungary found itself the butt of criticism from Pope Francis over its response to the migration crisis, Eduard had an unorthodox background for being a diplomat, having previously worked as a cartoon producer, novelist, and writer of zombie movies. He's since become something of a social media personality, his trenchant, socially conservative commentary earning him over 60,000 followers on Twitter. I'm delighted to say that Ambassador Habsburg joins me live from Rome. Welcome to GB News. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me on your Sunday show, Michael.
Tell me, Ambassador, why does a country have an ambassador to the Vatican?
Well, if I was only the ambassador to the Vatican, I would be an ambassador to a tiny little state within a state. But I'm the ambassador to the Holy See and to the Holy Father. And the Holy Father is the head of 1.3 billion people worldwide. So that is something else. I also have the feeling that right now, Pope Francis is probably one of the strongest moral voices in the world. And in times of conflict, this is a man you want to be close to and be in dialogue with. And that's why the last 8 years that I've been ambassador here have been very exciting.
Yes. Well, would you give me, please, a little potted history of those 8 years, or possibly just a tiny bit more? Let's go back to just before you were appointed, when Pope Francis was critical of Hungary's actions vis-à-vis the migration crisis. Tell me about those criticisms and tell me how relations have developed since, particularly since you've been ambassador.
Well, first of all, I was present in 2015, in the summer of 2015, during the migration crisis, when up to 10,000 migrants, illegal migrants, crossed the Hungarian border, thus entering the Schengen area without passports and any controls. So Hungary, of course, felt obliged to build a fence in order to control these people. And that was the same time when Pope Francis began saying things like people who build fences against migrants and refugees are not Christian. So you can imagine that I had to hit the floor running when I arrived in Rome in summer 2015, and then later on was received by Pope Francis. I think it was very important from the beginning, and this is something that I suggest to anybody, to carefully read what the Pope actually says. First of all, he's a Jesuit and a South American Jesuit. So don't suppose you know what he thinks, and don't suppose you know what he said unless you've read it, because many people sort of have an idea of the thought of Pope Francis by looking at the headlines in newspapers. But diplomats spend a lot of time of really reading and dissecting statements, interviews, speeches of the Pope. And you can tell that his position on migrants is far more balanced than most people would at first view see. For instance, Pope Francis said things like, a country that is not sure that it can integrate migrants should think well about accepting them. Pope Francis also said that migrants who arrive in a new place have to respect the values of the country where they are arriving. Pope Francis also said that the state has a right to sovereignty and to borders. And also one of the things he said that is very strong part of Hungarian policy in the Middle East and other places is the right to remain. Pope Francis strongly encourages countries to help people remain so they don't have to move out of their country with the help of human traffickers to get to Europe. All of this led to conversations with the Holy See, led to many dialogues, and in the end, I think, has led to a very, very good relationship with the Holy See. Pope Francis has visited our country twice in 3 years, which is not a normal thing to do. Many people are astounded about that. I understand why he does it. Hungary is great.
I think people in Britain will be quite interested with the exposition that you've given of the Pope's positions about migration. To come to a bottom line, do you personally and does your government believe that building the fences back in 2015 was right? And are you saying that you've led the Pope to conclude that it was right?
To your first question, yes. Hungary, as a conservative country, has the luxury not having to change their positions every few months. Hungary has been saying the same thing since years, and we're still saying it. No, I don't think that I have convinced the Pope of anything. The maximum that I think that I may have done is to show through my friendly, open and charming ways that Pope Francis sees that Hungary can't be that bad if their ambassador is so nice. I think some of that, but it's not all about migrants. Pope Francis likes Hungary for different reasons. If you look at the way he talked and behaved when he was in Hungary, he, for instance, made a strong critique of gender ideology that you didn't find any trace of in Western media after his speech. He did it in a prominent speech in front of Hungarian political leaders because he knows about our politics for families, etc., etc. So it's not just all about migration. There is far more. And Pope Francis seems to really like the Hungarians. He just dropped a few hints about the way he had good relations with Hungarians over decades before he decided to come. So it's not all the ambassador's fantastic work, but of course I'm trying to make that impression at home.
Now, tell me a bit about your role as a social influencer. 60,000 followers or more. What sorts of things are you talking about? Let me just pluck an example. Are you talking about abortion?
That's a difficult topic. I'm a diplomat, so I usually don't go for controversial topics. I usually try to find common ground. Most people would define my tweets as wholesome. Some more conservative followers of mine would sometimes say that I shouldn't be so milquetoast. But that's what diplomats do. But I will say that I have an interesting mix of family, faith, Hungary, monster movies, and sometimes current multimedia, internet, Twitter debate stuff. I try to engage. Although I became a grandfather 3 weeks ago, I feel rather young and in with the times when it comes to Twitter and social media. And I'm still in the lucky position that I can still react to people reaching out to me. I can read all the responses to my tweets, and I often interact with people. I enjoy this very much. It's a way of doing soft diplomacy internationally. I would say that more than half or even 2/3 of the people that follow me are from the English-speaking world. Quite a few from the States, of course, I think. But I suppose also quite a lot of followers from England. And that's the mix that I went for.
Very good. Well, may I join you in saying that, of course, you are very, very charming, and you've been so charming as to join us on GB News in the middle of the day on a Sunday. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you, Ambassador Habsburg. In a moment, we'll be discussing whether a ban on the importing of hunting trophies to the United Kingdom might actually lead to more wild animals being killed illegally in Africa. But before that, here are your latest news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
It's just coming up to 12:30. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove has apologised for what he's described as unacceptable behaviour at a Conservative staff party during lockdown, saying he's personally sorry. In the video, obtained by The Mirror, one party goer can be heard discussing bending the rules and laughing. At least 24 people attended the Christmas party in 2020 at Tory party headquarters during the height of the pandemic, when indoor socialising was banned. 2 of those were named in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. More than 10,000 people have been detected crossing the English Channel in small boats so far this year. Home Office figures have confirmed crossings have increased in recent days as the weather's improved, with more than 2,500 people making the journey in the past week. However, the total number of crossings this year remains below the equivalent number at this point last year. The UK has pledged an extra £16 million to boost Ukraine's cyber defences. It's in addition to £6.35 million promised last year. The government says it's to help Ukraine better defend its critical infrastructure from Russian attacks. The Prime Minister will use a summit this week to call on investors and businesses to step up support for the country's economic recovery. It all comes as Ukraine continues its counter-offensive against Russian forces in the south and east of the country. And Kensington Palace has released a new photo of Prince William and his children to mark Father's Day. George and Charlotte are either side of their dad. The youngest, Louis, is hugging William. All 4 are smiling. The picture was taken on the Windsor estate earlier this year. And more on all of our stories on our website, gbnews.com. That's it for the moment. Now back to Michael.
Thank you for that, Aaron. The hunting trophies importation prohibition bill is being debated in the House of Lords. It would prevent those who travel abroad to hunt from bringing their trophies to this country. The little-known bill has sparked a heated debate, with opponents arguing that it will harm the animals that it seeks to protect by damaging the hunting industry, which is claimed keeps wildlife numbers sustainable. The High Commissioners of South Africa, Namibia, Zambia, Botswana, Zimbabwe and Tanzania have all written to the Times accusing those behind the bill of adopting colonial attitudes to Africa. From Zimbabwe, I'm joined by Dr. Fulton Mangwanya, the Director General of Zimbabwe's Parks and Wildlife Management Authority, and Henry Smith MP, who's leading the charge, is also joining me. Fulton, thank you very much for being on GB News. What is the business model that means that would be threatened by this bill?
Thank you very much. The business model that would be threatened by the banning of importation legally under the trophies from Zimbabwe is on the campfire that we have, which is supporting over 800,000 families in Zimbabwe. They rely on the proceeds from legally hunted trophies. So the moment we actually try and do that, it will have some ripple effects, because other countries are likely going to follow the same, to say no more hunting or exportation of legally hunted trophies. My problem is we are actually doing this according to international laws, because CITES gave us quotas to do like hunting of elephants, over almost 500 elephants we are supposed to be hunting. So the moment we do this, we'll then have a ripple effect of other countries trying to follow what I feel does not promote international trade, which is supposed to be promoted by CITES. Thank you.
So, Fulton, big money is paid by people to go and hunt and to bring these trophies. That's part of the deal. That money is used in the countries that we're talking about in order to get people involved in animal conservation. And that means, of course, some animals are hunted, but it means that other animals survive. And it enables you to involve people who might otherwise want to turn the land to other purposes, like agricultural purposes. Is that pretty much the case?
Maybe if I get you correctly, the hunting that we are doing under campfire is actually promoting the protection of the same species which you are trying to protect from that other side, because there is value in these species which are also killing people, but people are benefiting from them through the process of hunting. For your own information, we have got the second largest population of elephants in the world, the fourth largest population of rhinos in the world, a thriving and growing population of large carnivores in the world. So if we don't do sport hunting, I don't think we'll be doing well, because we need money for conservation, we need money for the community's livelihood. And this can only be done through sport hunting, where we get big monies. And stopping it, like I said, is going to affect a lot of families, like 800,000 families. It is going to affect the protection per se, the costs which are borne by the national parks, the parastatal, which is not a government sponsored, or it's not getting anything from the fiscus in terms of wildlife conservation. So all things will go in limbo, and we are going to have problems of depletion of these species that we are claiming to be protecting by coming up with this bill.
I'm going to turn to Henry Smith MP now. Henry, there's quite a weight of evidence against this bill. We've got a letter from 6 High Commissioners from countries in Southern Africa, and we've just been listening to Fulton, who's in the conservation business. Do you not have second thoughts about this bill?
Well, good afternoon, Michael. I mean, first of all, I should explain what this bill does. If it becomes law, it will ban the importation to Great Britain of body parts of endangered species as so-called trophies. So this is the territorial extent of this bill is Great Britain, and it is saying that we, as British people, choose not to want to import endangered species body parts into this country. So we're not telling countries in Africa what to do, and indeed this bill covers endangered species all over the world. So it covers polar bears from Canada. We're not telling the Canadians what to do. This is simply what 9 out of 10 people in many opinion polls in this country are saying is we don't want to import endangered species. I find it very curious that there's an argument that to protect endangered species, you should shoot those endangered species. And I would say far better for economies that they have photo safaris where you can shoot many hundreds of times an animal with a camera. Of course, if you shoot an animal with a gun, it's one and done, sadly. And also, interestingly, I was contacted just earlier this morning by a former chief inspector of animal welfare in Zimbabwe, who was telling me that much of the money that the big trophy hunting companies spend actually goes in backhanders to government officials and doesn't go to local communities. And I think we've seen that in terms of the recent exiling of the Maasai in South Africa from their homelands to make way for game hunting, that this is very disingenuous indeed.
Henry Smith, I might say that a pretty similar argument is made in Britain about deer stalking, that, you know, deer stalking brings money in to the estates, that the herds have to be controlled, that, yes, someone gets to pull the trigger, but one of the results is that you get to protect the herds and that the herds continue to exist and the terrain continues to exist. But you seem to be imposing a rather, well, maybe colonial view upon Southern Africa.
This territorial extent of this bill is Great Britain. And the point about deer stalking, I might have a personal view on deer stalking, but they're not endangered species. This only covers those species that CITES, the international organization that determines whether an animal is endangered or threatened. It only covers those species, and it is about what we choose as a country to import into this country. The other point as well about somehow shooting endangered animals manages their conservation is, unfortunately, the hunters want to go after the big tusker elephants. They want to go after the lions with the big manes. Those are the healthiest examples in the gene pool, as it were, of those endangered species. So if you take those healthy animals out of those populations, then actually you exacerbate the problem of extinction of those majestic species.
Fulton, a last word to you. The accusation is made that some of the monies that are being paid are actually finding their way into corruption. Is that true? Is some of this money going to corrupt officials?
I'm sorry, but that one is false accusation. It's a false claim. In any case, the doors are open. We are open for anyone who wants to actually come and see how we're using the money. You know, the irony of the British is that, you know, they're talking of trying to love and protect the animals, which indirectly they are trying to destroy by actually coming up with this bill. Because I don't see how you protect by banning importation of the trophies to your country. Rather, it's influencing other countries to follow suit, which is going to destroy everything that we have actually done in Zimbabwe. We have done well in conservation of these animals. That's why I'm saying we have got the second largest population in the world after Botswana, which means we are doing well. This, in a way, is a punishment. And at the same time, mind you, we were a colony of the British. This is neo-colonialism. Because why are you actually coming indirectly to influence the way we are doing business in terms of conservation in Zimbabwe instead of supporting? Because EU actually gave us a lot of money to do the review of the same campfire which we are going to launch. The Americans give us the money at the initial stages, and they also gave us a lot of money thereafter to improve the campfire, which benefits the communities. If you are interested in the animals and if you are interested in the communities, it's better for you to relook at your bill and amend it accordingly so that it doesn't punish those who are doing well in conservation. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Our two speakers there are a long way apart from each other, Fulton Mungwanya and Henry Smith MP. Well, prepare for some food envy after the break as I indulge in some afternoon tea with Master Pâtissier Eric Langlois, a.k.a. Cake Boy.
I I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Vanity Fair magazine has called Eric Lanlard the best pâtissier in the world. But when it came to naming his business, he chose a simpler moniker, Cake Boy. The Frenchman came to Britain in 1989 to work for the famous Roux brothers before establishing his own patisserie in 1995. He's in constant demand, catering for everything from commercial airlines to luxury hotels. And he'll be baking for afternoon teas in the private boxes at Royal Ascot beginning on Tuesday. And Eric joins me now. And I'm thrilled to say that you have not come empty-handed. You've come bearing gifts and cakes. How lovely to see you. Welcome to GBNews.
My pleasure. And yeah, usually everywhere I go, there is some cake following somewhere.
You were in the French Navy.
Yes, I did my national service in the French Navy. And I was very lucky because I did it at seas. So I was on the flagship to the French Navy with the helicopter carrier Jeanne d'Arc, La Jeanne d'Arc. And when traveling the world, I went away for 5 months visiting 14 different countries. I was at the age of 20.
And you came to the attention of the president.
Yes, so every year when it was time for the flagship of the nation to leave for his annual tour around the world, usually it was the Minister of Defence who was coming and waving goodbye in Brest, in Brittany, where I'm from. But that year, because it was a big anniversary, the President himself came. So that was my first official dinner or lunch, I will say, luncheon on board. I was the private pastry chef of the captain of the ship. Only in France that thing could happen. But basically, we were a floating embassy. We were traveling the world, promoting all the best of the France have to offer, from the food to the wine to technology and everything.
Did the president taste your cakes?
He did, and he came to the back kitchen to thank us after lunch. Gave me some beautiful cuffling with his crest, which I still wear today.
Isn't that marvellous? What you produce is so beautiful. You were with the Roux brothers, where I suppose the discipline is very strict, great emphasis on quality and presentation. What you have here is really superb. Shall we sample some of them? And what order do you think we ought to go in?
Well, this is the afternoon tea. I mean, I'm a big fan of afternoon tea, and I always say, you know, skip lunch, skip dinner, go for afternoon tea, because I think it's such a great ritual, and it's one of the biggest British export, I have to say, and it's great. So this one is what we're going to serve, as you already perfectly mentioned, from Tuesday at Royal Ascot. So this is this year Royal Ascot afternoon tea. In numbers, we're talking about 6,500 cake, which is 6,500 afternoon tea. So 6,500 of each of those cakes.
So there are no cucumber sandwiches or anything like that. You're straight into the cakes.
Absolutely no cucumber sandwiches. We have some sandwiches, but we're giving them a little twist and keeping the modern twist as well. So it's quite a lot.
Where do we start?
I will recommend to start, if you are brave, with the cannoli here, which is a Valrhona chocolate mousse with a liquid salted butter caramel. So I would definitely use a spoon for
this is going to explode, is it?
It's going to. I think the magic word is oozing. We like
it is oozing. So you break apart the crust. Well, it's soft, but inside you've got a wonderful oozing liquid, which is going to be very, very difficult to eat on camera.
Salted butter caramel.
Oh my goodness.
So every year we try to
divine.
Elevate our offering visually and taste-wise as well.
But you begin with chocolate. That's surely the strongest taste of all, isn't it?
That will keep your taste buds, starting to work, and then you can light it up. Here we've got a honey cake, so that's made with British clear honey, and on the top we've got English rose flavoured frosting as well, which is a light cream cheese.
Let me have
frosting.
a go at that. Would you
Probably
mind
easier to
passing
eat. This is
yeah, this will, well, slightly easier. Oh, the beautiful decoration. We've got a little feather here, and so honey from somewhere in England.
Yes, it's a British clear honey, so coming from the isle, and it's you can use your finger on this one.
Mm-hmm.
So this year, obviously, it's an exciting year. I mean, it's going to be the first year without Her Majesty the Queen, but at the same time, the first year with the King. So again, this morning on Instagram, I reposted Royal Ascot just released the program. And of course, the first program with is Majesty initials on the front. So it's going to be quite a big year this year. And it looked like the weather is going to be with us as well.
Your clients are simply the greatest. I don't know whether there's any way of showing this to the television camera. I'm going to try anyway. I mean, that is so beautiful. What is it? How have you created all these lovely colours here?
OK, so this one is what we call an hybrid. So it's actually a choux pastry. So if you imagine a profiteroles, but before it goes into the oven, we put a little disc of short crust pastry on the top. And that's been flavoured with cherries, and we put a little bit of colouring inside, natural food colouring. And then you bake the two together, and you end up with that lovely crust on the outside, which in France we call craquelin. So it crackled on the outside, giving a great texture. And inside we've got a Kent sherry compote, vanilla bean paste, crème pâtissière, and a cherry mousse on the top with a little bit of dark chocolate. I'm all about textures, colours.
Yes, indeed
you are. Which is very important.
Tell me a little bit about your this is breaking up. We haven't really provided well for this.
Exactly.
Tell me a little bit about your television career and do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy talking to people on television about your baking?
Absolutely. I love sharing my passion with baking, and most of the time people are always finding some excuse not to bake. Maybe 10 years ago before I started doing TV program. So I was always on the mission to share with people, first of all, my passion, but at the same time to demonstrate to them that it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need a lot of crazy expensive equipment, and you can achieve something if you're going the right way. So we did some great TV series, with including travel logs, which I'm sure you will have loved. We traveled all over Europe to follow the footsteps of the first celebrity chef/pastry chef, who was Antonin Carême. We went from Vienna to St. Petersburg to Paris, obviously, even to Brighton, where he was based. So my two passions, travel and my love of patisserie and baking. So it was really, really interesting, and I learned so much as well.
And that brings us to an important point about your cakes, which is that they're not all French by any means. There are many, many international influences in your cakes.
Yeah, always. So I've always been open to the world, and it definitely my travel when I was in the French Navy, when I was pretty young, and when I traveled with my parents, opened my eyes, as we say, and gave me a lot of inspiration. I like to say I'm classically French trained, but I like to get inspiration from everywhere. I always pick and choose, and I never copy and paste, because that I think is it's important. So I always.
And which countries, for example, outside Europe, make an important contribution to cake making?
Cake making, the US, they love their baking, so it's a big part of their side. And sorry for the Americans who are watching us today. The problem with the Americans is they love sugar, so they crucified everything by not using good quality chocolate or good quality ingredients. But at the same time, they are really, really passionate about their baking and their bakery as well. So when I go there, I always get like some maybe smell or textures and things, and then I take it back here and I twist it around using some good ingredients and, of course, my knowledge of patisseries.
I don't think I'm going to be able to eat this, but let's end our discussion of this tea with the scone.
Oh my God! So
now this is just one of the simplest things in the world, isn't it?
It is. So for this year ascot, we're doing a lemon one, which is this one here with lemon zest and lemon oil, and this one is just a golden sultanas one. But I always say when it's time for scone in this country, I just love it. Forget about politics. If you're going to want to start a debate, it's all about cream first or jam first, and that's it. I mean, on my Instagram, sometimes if there's not much activation going on, I just put the question, you put a picture of a scone, cream first, jam first, and then the comment below is just, people get outraged by whatever you do.
I'm sure you do something, well, you've told us what you do with scones, you do something very particular, but I was getting at the simplicity of it. This is a very, very simple thing, and yet you're gracing it by making it part of your ascot tea.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to Royal Ascot on Tuesday, there is many afternoon teas will be served around, but then there is the Royal Ascot afternoon tea, and this one is coming with my scone and my recipes, because you have to have a good scone. They have to be warm when they're served. So we're doing them at the last minute. So imagine every day we're baking 12,000 scones every single day.
I can't imagine that. What does that look like? What sort of plant? What sort of ovens do you have to enable that?
Huge deck ovens and a big army of chefs and runners, going. Because the thing with afternoon tea as well is everybody turn up at the same time, so it's not like gradually. So we get like in different venues up to 500 people coming in all in one go. So it's not like a restaurant where you can step them in, so which is great. But it's a big part of Royal Ascot. Queen Anne used to go to what is now the Ascot racecourse to ride and to have afternoon tea, because it was her favourite spot, and that's why Royal Ascot is there, or Ascot racecourse is there today. So it's a big part of it, and people expect it, and they expect something of high quality.
What's left for you to do? What are your ambitions?
I will really love to do a TV series, a travelogue around France, because people know the tarte tatin, they know the little specialities, but there is so many rural and traditional recipes on beauty and delicious who have never been showcased. So I think it would be great. Maybe you could come with me. We could get together in, 2CV or more glamorously into a Citroën DS and drive around France and discover all the specialities, which I'm sure people would just love and are so, nobody talk about.
Eric Longlard, it's been absolutely marvellous to talk to you. Thank you for sharing these fantastic creations. Emily Carver is up next. She's not got here in time for the treats, unfortunately. Stay with GB News. Thank you to all my guests today. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time. I look forward to that very much. Bye-bye.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation.